Hello all, Rick here with a video that is a bit of everything, really, on Gallery Books' The Dark Veil by James Swallow. This is a Picard series prequel book and a continuation from The Last Best Hope by Una McCormack, of a sort. Having recently finished it, I wanted to take my time with it. Initially I'll give some spoiler-free impressions and thoughts, review of sorts I guess, before looking into some specifics and lore implications. However, if you want to avoid any details about it, ignore this video. Wait, no, don't ignore the video, I need the views. Go watch another one of mine. I know how to YouTube. So, to begin with, this book follows the crew of the USS Titan, specifically the Riker family, including the previously unseen Thaddeus Riker in the year 2386, 1 year before the Romulan sun goes supernova, and a year after Jean-Luc Picard retired from Starfleet following the Mars attacks. It also switches frequently to the point of view of a Romulan vessel, the IRW Othris, a Mogai-class warbird, similar to those seen in Star Trek Nemesis. So, in terms of the state of the galaxy, things are a little strained, to say the least. Starfleet, at this stage as an organisation, is in the midst of its defensive reactionary stance after the Mars attacks, which still remains a mystery. The USS Titan has been pulled back from deep space exploration that it had been doing for the prior 7 years and tasked with closer-to-home patrols around the neutral zone. Interestingly, the crew of the USS Titan includes a roster of familiar names, such as the First Officer, Christine Vale, the XO of the Titan in both this story and prior Titan novels, as well as mostly new ones, as the Titan has just recently had a crew turnover as part of its reassignments. We can get into that on the spoiler talk. The mission it finds itself involved in centres around a species called the Jazari, Federation affiliates who have recently decided to recall all their Starfleet members and colonists to their homeworlds for some reason. But it's right on the edge of the neutral zone, or I guess former neutral zone since the events of the first Picard book. Hence, Romulans get involved. The story, much like its predecessors, unfolds its narrative by bouncing between a Federation POV and the Romulans, but we also spend some time in the shoes of the young Thaddeus Troi Riker, which is annoying for me because I dislike reading things from a kid's perspective, but that's a personal gripe. It's not done badly at all, I just get frustrated that to Thad, bullies are more important than the state of the Romulan evacuation and such, but hey, that is child priorities for you. The tale it tells is a self-contained mission about why the Jazari are acting so secretive, how can Starfleet help while keeping its distance, and of course, like any other story involving Romulans, just what is the Star Empire really up to here. This differentiates it from Last Best Hope, however, which was set over the course of several years and sort of checked in with Picard and other characters throughout the course of the Romulan evacuation until it all came to a standstill in 2385. The fact it only covers a single mission means that it's less focused on world building and more on fleshing out characters within the tale, building out a likeable cast, although the villain of the piece is rather cartoonishly evil. But I can only cover that in depth with spoilers. This book doesn't do a great deal to expand upon lore or answer questions about the lead up to the Mars incident, which was very much the focus of The Last Best Hope. This tale is more about how the crew of the Titan, Riker in particular, is dealing with the aftermath of the event and the decision made to withdraw and raise the drawbridge, as it were. Overall, I found it a more engaging read than the previous because of the scope afforded it. Whereas the prior book had a lot to flesh out and a large chunk of world building to accomplish, this one tells a more cohesive storyline akin to the sort of thing that would have made a two-parter episode as part of a TNG run. That being said, I think the villain could have been a little stronger, even if there is a reason for their villainy. There are a couple of standout characters that I really did enjoy, but most of the background crew that was not part of the original Titan lot, I felt very little for, although there is some effort to flesh them out. I actually found a greater diversity among the new Romulan characters. So that about sums up my impressions of the book. Let's instead talk lore. Spoilers ahead. This book has the Tal Shiar as the antagonists to the USS Titan, or more specifically, the Zhat Vash. It's been established in the shows that the Zhat Vash take particularly zealous Romulan Tal Shiar agents, all female for some reason, and bring them to the planet Aya, where they have uncovered the admonition. Now, in the series we learn all about where that thing came from, and that it's instructions for synthetics to create an interdimensional distress call of sorts. An organic mind cannot make sense of it. In fact, it's so incompatible that it basically causes madness, and never has that been more clearly portrayed than by the first-person musings of Commander Hellick. Although that scene in Picard kind of does a good job to paint them as insane. Hellick is a Romulan Zhat Vash, which is completely clandestine, even to the other members of the Tal Shiar, and the operative assigned to the Orthris. Every Romulan vessel has at least one publicly known Tal Shiar agent as a method of control and fear from the Star Empire, but not every agent is secretly part of a cult of broken minds that has become convinced that destroying synthetic intelligence is worth sacrificing all for. Her actions are backed up by this level of insane devotion, so that anything she does, no matter how short-sighted or evil it is justified by her belief in the Zhat Vash cause, which creates a rather one-note villain. Commander Medaka, captain of the Orthris, however, is the complete opposite. He is a level-headed and understanding leader on par with Riker, and comparisons between the two are frequently made. So, of course, he has to go in order to allow for an antagonist, but it's refreshing to encounter a Romulan officer who, while not pleased that the Federation has abandoned its plans to aid in the evacuation, is not going to take it out on the USS Titan, and he genuinely has a compassionate heart. What I find interesting is the further insights into the Star Empire we get before everything goes to hell with the supernova. The Tal Shiar and government control the flow of information and are now the only ones running evacuation in Romulan space, meaning that if your family is within the blast zone, you better serve the Empire well, so that their scheduled transport departs on time. This is the not-so-veiled threat used by the Empire to maintain control over its citizens, even as the clock approaches midnight. On top of this, the previous book established how the government was taking the opportunity to leave behind those people it deemed troublesome, or loose ends, by keeping them in the dark and pretending they had more time than they really did. Unsurprisingly, we learn that the Jazari are in fact androids, from Andromeda in disguise, complete with Terminator-style organic sheaths. So when Hellick learns of this, boom, there's the conflict. It's worth mentioning that Hellick is the only one who knows about the Zhat Vash. Even the reinforcements she summons are simply Tal Shiar vessels, responding as ordered, so secretive is the order, which makes her come off as even more erratic to the Orthris crew. Another player on the Romulan side of things is the character Vadrel, who at first appears to be much like the many other stand-in characters of the Orthris, but this scientist harbours a dark past. An ongoing mystery of the Romulan Supernova is how it started. In Star Trek Online it was down to the Iconians meddling in preparation for their return, but STO is not canon to the shows, and I don't think Trek TV is ready for another full-on war series, so a new reason is needed. But we do get hints in both Picard and Last Best Hope that the supernova appears to have no natural cause, which is also used to explain why it's happening with only a few years of warning instead of thousands of years, and why it proliferates way more than it should. Vadrel seems to be a scientist that was somehow involved in an experiment years ago that may have triggered the supernova, and now he is living under an alias as a scientist on a ship being utilised by the Tal Shiar, who hold this secret over his head to ensure his cooperation. But that is all we get here. Mentions of an experiment, a guilt-ridden scientist, and Tal Shiar in the know. Speaking of STO not being canon, let's talk about this book's place. It has been mentioned before that the Picard books and comics are to be considered canon to the shows, but Trek has always treated anything not on screen as non-canonical, and I have a hard time dissuading myself that this will all be brushed aside, despite the fact that it hasn't been so far. I do note a trend, however, one that began in Picard and continued in the books, of borrowing from prior apocrypha, such as the comics making the USS Verity as an Odyssey class straight from Star Trek Online, and some general plot points around the post-Supernova Romulus, that is to say the fractured state and multiple factions that the Star Empire has been reduced into. We get another one here, which also draws straight from the lore of Picard, which in turn shares similarities with the STO timeline. Borg. The Romulans were dealing with the Borg for as long as Starfleet was, if not longer. As I've said before, check most maps of the Star Trek galaxy and you can see that Romulan space is in between the Borg and the UFP. We see this with the Artifact, which in 2399 has come under the ownership of the Romulan Free State, where their research is being offered to other interested parties, and even in the opening of Lower Decks, yeah I know, but that show makes a lot of allusions to the greater Trek universe, even if they are tongue-in-cheek. The Tal Shiar ships that show up to assist Helic are said to be similar in design to the Orthrees, but have a variety of prongs and dangerous-looking additions based off of prototype weapons, rumoured to be Borg in origin. This heavily ties into other non-canonical sources, which have the Tal Shiar in particular delving deep into Borg research and outfitting their vessels with the results. I'm not saying STO is canon, but I am saying that current Trek is taking a lot of ideas from the myriad of surrounding materials, and I'm okay with that, because there is a lot amid all that which would make for good additions to canon. Switching from the Star Empire now, in terms of the Titan, I mentioned that some of the crew were the same as those in the pocketbook novels, and comparing the characters' backstories, yeah, they are meant to be the same people. However, some events from the books that featured them could not possibly have happened. For example, the Destiny books culminated in a big crossover event that wiped out the Borg altogether, which clearly hasn't happened. Equally, Riker in the Apocrypha becomes a Rear Admiral in 2385, which again is now dismissed in favour of keeping him on the bridge, which then ties into the Picard series where he is still a captain in reserve. So it seems that Star Trek products are pulling a bit of a Disney with their canon, in that now they are digging further into territory already told by other licensed works. They are scrapping it, but not altogether, instead cherry-picking bits and pieces to keep. The fact that they included mention of a recent Titan crew swap is done to explain away where the rest of the pocketbook's crew may have gone. So in a way, it attempts to preserve some of those characters, and maybe even events too, without directly referencing them. Then there is the surprise cameo at the end from Spock, who has finished evacuating his unificationists and is now preparing to reach out to LaForge and the Vulcan Science Academy for a project he's keeping secret, but we know to be the Red Matter bomb and the Jellyfish ship. Again, we have some selective lore being plucked from prior stories, in this case the Countdown comic book, where it was stated that Geordi LaForge created the Jellyfish specifically to deliver the Red Matter. This comic used to be part of this pseudo-canon stories that was true for the Kelvin timeline, but can no longer be accurate because it featured a fully alive Captain Data. But again, even in that we see Romulans messing with Borg tech. How do you feel about the Star Trek books borrowing so selectively from past works? On the whole, I like it, but I can see issues where it muddies the water, like with the Titan books, at least up until a point. Ideally, I'd love to see a curated list of tales marked out as in continuity, but that would devalue things not on that list, so that ain't gonna happen. I think this is the best way of softly folding in as much of the expanded lore as possible into future Trek projects, even if it is frustratingly vague. But all this I feel only really matters to someone like me who is overly concerned with the Trek universe as a whole. Then again, surely it's those kind of people who buy the books. In the end, it has little bearing on the book itself, which, as I mentioned earlier, was fine. I was just hoping for more of a tie-in with the lore as a whole, and a sort of want to prompt a discussion. Have you read this book? Do you intend to do so? And if so, why did you watch the spoiler section? Now, I think if you found Last Best Hope to be a bit dry, and basically an exposition dump, then this is a more cohesive tale on a smaller scale. Thanks for watching my impressions video on The Dark Veil, and I'll see you again in another lore, gameplay or review video. Thanks again, and goodbye.